Hello, hello, hello. This is Christina Barr. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello, hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today I'm just warning you, my internet is, I don't know, it's like really wonky when I was trying to download some of my prep, the software I'm working in. I can't see some of my stuff, but I'm going to power through it because there's been some, I don't know, some weird notification stuff with Facebook as of late, and I didn't want to just be like, hey, I'm not doing it today. If I could power through it, hopefully I'm not just like pixelated glitching when you see this. So we're going to power through it today. But today we're going to be talking about there's a new Quinnipiac poll with Hispanics. Oh, Biden is at 19% approval. That is remarkable, especially since there was a time when these Democrats are like thinking all these people are going to come across the border and they're going to let them in, they're going to give them amnesty, and they're going to one day be Democrat voters. And then you have people on the right who are very concerned about this, but the whole demographics is destiny sort of thing. And that might not be so, because a lot of people, one thing that's really driving it is inflation, how crazy it's getting, because people who are fled like countries where bad policies led to high inflation, people not being able to buy food and starving and all that other kind of stuff, they don't want that sort of thing to happen to the place where they fled to. So Biden is in big trouble with his poll numbers. It's bad for everybody. In the poll I just saw, he was underwater with blacks, but it was close to it. So he was like at 29% with white people. So Biden is really screwed, and he's really doesn't want to take the steps necessary to fix it. He's going to lean in harder to the left, it seems. I don't know if he'll ever kind of flip back into common sense after midterms when they lose pretty bad. If Republicans don't screw that up, it doesn't seem like that's something that can be screwed up right now, but I don't know. Who knows? don't underestimate them. Also, I want to talk about this video from Kamala Harris. She was at the NCAAP meeting, and she was talking about abortion, and she compared it to slavery, and she's just the worst. She was my least favorite out of all the Democrats, and I can't stand her. So someone had mentioned it on a TikTok comment. I'm like, no, she did not. And I said that not meaning that I couldn't believe that she didn't say that. I'm just like, I don't know, just like stop. Like, don't really and she did. And we're going to go through it because these people are so blatantly dishonest, and it's amazing how they try to weaponize race with this sort of thing when it's like, bro, do you know the origin of like eugenics and abortion and like organizations like Planned Parenthood and all this, like these organizations that you protect and you allow your foreign to get money for? Do you know those origins? So we're going to talk about that today. Before we jump into it, I want to encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com, check out different articles that we have on the website. I am still plugging away at my new book. They'll be dealing with abortion, particularly from a perspective of a Christian. You guys know that I like to prefer, I guess is a better word, to make secular arguments and keep religion out of it, because people, I don't know, get really, really defensive about it, not listen to what you have to say anyway. And I'm like, I don't need to mention it. I don't need to bring up the Bible and say you can't have abortions because it makes baby Jesus cry. No, my reasoning is a lot deeper than that. But it's very clear that there's people trying to tear down, I don't know, sort of fundamental views in the Bible and how we view the world. So I think it's an important book for Christians out there, so they can be like, hey, this is what our faith says, and if you ascribe to this, then you should know that this is at least wrong, and go from there. And then it's going to deal with other things as well. There's going to be a lot of great arguments in it. So it's going to be a great book for everybody. I've finished my intro and finished like the first chapter. So heading into the next one. So I want to get out pretty fast. I do write books, obviously. I write nonfiction now. And I also another nonfiction book, Slay Your Fear, which I wrote during COVID. It's about overcoming a spirit of fear, and I just wish people had listened to me. That's all. But that's available, and all my other books are like chapter books for middle grade kids. I do have picture books that are written, but I'm still like waiting on the illustrations for like those things to be finished. But I do have a lot of like young adult novels. And if you are interested this weekend, if you're in Michigan, I'm going to be at an author's event called Once Upon a Book. It's going to be in Frankenmuth, Michigan, like at the Bavarian Inn. So Friday night is a ball. I'm not totally sure if I'm going to go to that. I think I might. I don't know. I don't plan to stay up there, so I'm going to drive back. So it's not like terribly far. The gas is terribly high. I just don't know. I'm not sure. And it's church. I don't know if I want to miss church for it. It's up in the air. I'll definitely be there on Saturday. So if you're going this weekend, I will be there. Again, it's called Once Upon a Book. It's going to be at the Bavarian Inn on Saturday and Friday, but I don't know if I'm going to be there Friday, but I'm definitely going to be there Saturday for the author's event. You can go ahead and look it up if you're in Michigan. Another event I'm going to be at will be the Motor City Comic Con. That will be in October. And so you guys can check out some of my books there. And if anybody's interested in having me, any other sort of places, events, you can reach out at blacktnews.com. If you enjoy what I do here, you can go to blacktnews.com/donate and support if you would like to do that. You can also support by looking at getting different merchandise, like the. Let me show. Man, that stuff is not popping up. Okay. I've got these technical difficulty issues with my stuff today. But I got all kinds of merchandise you guys can check out at the website. Got the cool, like, Be Better Not Bitter shirt. I got different hoodies. I got different mugs. All kinds of stuff you guys can check out on the website. And that does also support. Make sure that you guys are that you're sharing, that you're subscribing. All my handles are at Black Tea News, with the exception of Twitter. That one's at True Black Tea, and it's black like the color and tea like the drink. So let me go ahead. I don't have any funny things for you guys today. No memes today, but let me go ahead and knock out this Kamala Harris video. Hopefully this plays just fine, because we are having some issues with the internet today.
We know, NAACP, that our country has a history of claiming ownership over human bodies.
Say it. You don't need to say it. You don't need to say it. She'd be probably really aggravated with that, given her history of how she rose to power. Anyway, you know, sexual liberation and all that, implying that she's a slut. Anyway, Kamala Harris. Yes, we have a history in the United States of people claiming ownership of one's bodies. But here's what I don't understand. I don't understand how people can't see that is the justification for abortion. Because people deep down, they are aware of the fact there's people who will admit it's just a baby. They just feel like bodily autonomy should supersede that. As a matter of fact, a lot of people nowadays, when they argue with some kind of philosophy, it's mainly based on bodily autonomy, and they're like, it doesn't matter that it's alive. They like just try to just argue past the point. And there's people who are like, I know it's a baby, but I just believe it's a woman's right to choose, and etc. So they know it's alive, but they don't want to value its right to life. But if someone else were to take their life, for like everyone normally, when I have a conversation, they agree that Scott Peterson should have been charged for the death of his wife and his unborn child. People agree with that. There was a case a couple years ago where a boyfriend gave his girlfriend some pills, and it ended up causing, she didn't know that it would make her have an abortion. Um, his I think his father was a doctor or something. They got her some pills, and she thought it was for something else, and then she, ended up having a miscarriage, and so he suffered for that as well. And most people agree that would be wrong. He should be punished for obviously his assault against her, but also what happened to their unborn child. And that was 6 weeks. 6 weeks. So if people can see that it's wrong to take their lives when people want them, when the mother wants them, then there's more inherent value than they're offering. But they'll admit that the wantedness is what matters. So if they don't want to acknowledge these people as persons with their own right to life and bodily autonomy, then what are they? Are they the woman's property? Which some people start, pussyfooting around a little bit and don't want to answer that. But some people will say, like, yeah, they are. So we've entered this sort of agreement mentally, maybe whether people want to acknowledge it or not, that they think that the unborn aren't their own persons, but they're an extension of like the mother's property. They're definitely not the mother's body. There's people who say that, but we know that doesn't make any sense. If a mother has a boy, she doesn't have his penis. That's they have different DNA. I had a conversation with my sister last night. I asked her about um, if she has a different blood type, like with her son, who's her first child, she had to have a shot because if her blood mixed in with her son's blood, she was a different blood type within him, and I think she's O. Then the next baby she would have had her body would have prepared antibodies and tried to kill the next baby. So I don't think she had to have it with at least two of her other kids. I think were the final shot or so, or because they found out that they did have like the same blood type, but people are like aware that it's not your body, it's a different body in your body. So they do believe that they have an ownership not just of their body, of what's inside the body, even though they put a new body in their body from their consensual actions 99% of the time, you know. So we do have a history of ownership, but Kamala Harris is supporting the further ownership, which by the way her family did own slaves back in the day. So, and a lot of people's families did, but just want to keep that in some context since these people always want to remind people of the sins of America. So people clapping along like that, it's gross. It's gross. Also, there's the fact of eugenics in our country, this idea that one, that you can breed out suffering, that's a big deal with eugenics, but also that there's particular people who are undesirables, and so you want to make sure, I guess for the benefit of society, that you just kind of try to wean them out of society. And so they would do that by forced sterilization. There was this big court case with Buck versus Bell, where there was a young girl, I believe she was adopted, and her adopted the adopt the son in the family ended up raping her, and so she got pregnant, and they probably did just because you're just embarrassed, and then they're like, well, she needs to be sterilized, and they sterilized this girl and went to the Supreme Court, and they sterilized her and opened the door for many other people being sterilized for being feeble-minded. That's part of our nation's history. And Margaret Sanger, who's the founder of Planned Parenthood, she agreed with the court case with Buck versus Bell, and she was a eugenicist. She believed in limiting the population of minorities and the poor and the feeble-minded, and she even knew that it was important to get Black people on board and to get them to to these different places and Planned Parenthood and so on. So they would pay colored ministers, or it was their plot anyway. She wrote about it to associates to pay different Black people to be in these places, to be the friendly face to lure them in. And so she's when she was testing for like birth control, she would test that on ethnic people, and there were some unethical things that went on that front. There's a history of some not great things from Margaret Sanger that people will now acknowledge, but that's just because more people have talked about it. But she wasn't the only person in Planned Parenthood with this history of eugenics. The person who took over Planned Parenthood after her was Alan Guttmacher. And Margaret Sanger wasn't even into abortion as much as like Planned Parenthood is into abortion nowadays, she really believed in birth control. But that was like a big difference, like going from her to like the people who took it over, because they really actively wanted to increase the numbers of abortions. It wasn't like a necessary evil. They're like, we got a quota to meet. So when people talk about racism in regards to these issues, do they not, can they not smell their own, stuff? Can they not? And it's not like I Kamala Harris is, well, I want to say she's not stupid, but we've seen too many videos. We've seen far too many videos. So maybe she's not like is normally is it, enormously articulate. But she's smart enough, I believe, to know the history of some of these things. Now, you'd be surprised how many educated, successful people are in a bubble and they don't know a lot of things. Um, it would be hard for me not to. It'd be hard for me to believe that she isn't aware of some of this darker history with Planned Parenthood. But I having conversations with people, I guess a lot of people are still oblivious to it. So I guess we have to keep talking about it, talk about it a lot. But I guess people have to keep talking about it because some people just don't know. Um, but to just pretend like being pro-life is somehow indicative in parallel to racism, when all this stuff has to do with population control and getting rid of like undesirable people, you know, come on. And people are well aware of the fact that black women abort their babies more than white women. It's way disproportionate. People are well aware of the fact where these Planned Parenthoods are located in inner cities. And if you look at some of their ads, they're normally people who are black, Hispanic, and so on. I've shared them, like I've seen them, I've saved them. I'm like, that's a weird thing for this organization to tweet out on Mother's Day, but okay. Screen grab. Just for the record. Just for the record. Let's go on.
And today, extremist so-called leaders are criminalizing doctors and punishing women for making healthcare decisions for themselves.
I'm sorry. We're just going to take a while for us to get through this little clip video, but abortion isn't healthcare. I know that's what people say. I know that's a slogan. I know you don't even always go to like a hospital to a doctor. You go to these clinics. They move women through those clinics like cattle. There's one video, I think Live Action did like an undercover video that came out recently, where there's a pregnant woman and they were trying to give her like a pill to relax her, and she's like, well, I would just really rather talk to the doctor first before I do that. And then and I say relax, I mean relax. And they're like, no, you have to take this first before you see the doctor, because everything's going to go very quickly, after you take this and you sign this and you get to the doctor. Like, you need to have this in the system by the time you see him. And so that seemed, sketchy. Someone, I mean, she was like an undercover person, but it's like weird if a woman comes in here and she's having second thoughts, or she wants more information and she wants to have like maybe an informed conversation with her doctor, and she's like a little relaxed or loopy, maybe from the drugs, or more prone to their suggestions. I don't think that's cool. There's a lot of women who are coerced into abortions. You're talking about people making decisions about their body. There's people who, how can we truly have medical decisions if we don't have true informed consent? There was someone who was going back and forth on one of my TikTok pages. Now, I don't see, they didn't really engage with me in my comments, but they were going back and forth for a long time with other people. I don't know why they avoided me. But anyway, the one comment they said, I ended up doing a video reply, which they didn't reply to my reply. But they said that they thought that outsiders couldn't possibly make these decisions and that it should be between a woman and her doctor, and the doctors should inform them, and they should have informed consent, and then ultimately make that decision, whatever. And I'm just like, well, what's informed consent? Now, I'm sure you guys have probably heard the saying that like 95, 96% of biologists agree that life starts at conception. Now, that was from a dissertation from a student. Well, he's I guess a biologist and stuff now, or doctor or something. And so, um, in that, he sent out like these surveys to tons of people, and he only got a reply back from over 5,700 and something numbers of biologists, and most of them are Democrat, most of them are pro-choice, so they're like left-winging majority of these people who have responded, and 96% of them said, yeah, life starts at conception. Now, they didn't sign on to his like bigger point, you know, and there's a lot of biologists who are like, yeah, this starts at conception, but it's bigger than that. And you need nuance, and you actually do need politicians and theologians and whatever to weigh in on this. And another interesting thing about that paper, though, is that they asked Americans, like, do you think this is important to know when life begins? And vast majority said yes. We're talking about maybe like 82% of Americans said that it's important, need to know. There was a number, it was like 76 maybe percent said it was vital to knowing when. I think 76% said that they needed to know when life began in order to have true informed consent. I think that was a number. And 82% said, I think 93% said that they believed when when biologists or whatever determined that, then the life should actually be protected. And I think 82% said that it was important for Americans to kind of know. And it was relevant to the abortion debate. So people saying that they need informed consent, part of the informed consent is actually knowing, like, hey, this is a life. And people don't want to acknowledge that. They want to talk past that. And the biologists don't even like want to answer that question, even though like 80% of people said, like, when dealing with who's best to make this determination, 80% said biologists. 80% said biologists. So how can we truly have informed consent when no one truly wants to inform people, and no one really wants an objective standard? Like, I'm doing a lot of research and stuff for my book, and there's these biologists that are like, oh, I still believe it should be between a woman and her doctor, and women need to make those choices, and they choose arbitrary lines for same reasons people who are not biologists choose arbitrary lines. So how can we truly have informed consent when people don't want to say, hey, FYI, this is a human, they are alive. Whether people value life, that's always going to be subjective. It's always going to be subjective. There's a really dumb argument, like the trolley problem, when they're like, hey, I'm going to prove you're not really pro-life and you don't really believe life starts at conception. What if you are outside and there's two buildings on fire, and one is an IVF clinic and the other has some toddlers in it? Are you going to save the thousands of embryos, or are you going to save the toddlers? And most people would say, I guess I'd save the toddlers. I've seen some people say embryos, I think, just to screw with people. But they think the fact that people would decide, now again, this is like a trolley problem. They think that means that the embryos aren't alive. Now, there's a couple of different factors, like how much will the toddlers suffer compared to the embryos? Or you see a toddler and you're like, I don't know, instinct, right? You see the IVF clinic and you're like, are all these eggs even going to get implanted? And how will I keep them safe and not damage them on the way out? There's all sort of like variables that you could think about, but none of them say that those embryos aren't alive and the toddler isn't alive. And by the way, if you had like Biden, Obama, Nancy Pelosi in one building, and if it was my nephew who's, a baby now, but let's say he was just kind of floating in embryo form and I could go save him and put him back in his mother or something and he'd be here with me now, like I would do that. Like they'd all be gone. So that doesn't mean they're not alive. That doesn't mean that people don't value them and they're not important. It's our value is subjective, but that's one reason why I think we need to support the idea, at least the idea of intrinsic value, because if people have to earn value, who gets to say when they reach that threshold? Maybe you don't think black people have reached that threshold. It's not like that's far-fetched. Where you think you can enslave them or treat them like garbage or toss them over a shit because you think they're cargo and you want the insurance money. Look up the Zong case. Look up the Zong case. So we need to have objective standards, and we need the clearest, most consistent lines possible. And that's conception. So let's get back to the video.
Personal decisions that is her right to make in consultation with her doctor, her pastor, her priest, her rabbi, her loved ones, not her government telling her what to do.
This is coming from a woman who is the vice president of an administration who wanted everyone to get the jab or they could not work and provide for their families and their communities and put money in the offering buckets at their churches if they want it closed down. Like, come on. People are so dishonest about bodily autonomy. They say it's different between COVID and abortion. Well, yeah, in the metric that abortion is deliberate killing and you're not likely to die from COVID. Like, one's worse than the other, bro. But if you value bodily autonomy, you could say there's variables and factors that you can consider. But if you think that people should be able to have control over what goes in their bodies, and why does bodily autonomy why doesn't it extend to what your body produces? Like someone like her be for like Medicare for all or getting rid of private insurance and doing universal health care, etc. But they believe, though, that you should be able to terminate a life. They'll describe it as denying bodily resources, even at the expense of someone's life. That's how they'll describe it. Though you can't deny it. Abortion isn't just denying someone, it's actively using violence. Okay, it's not just denying someone. I can tell you no, and I didn't violently aggress upon you. That's just me not consenting or you not consenting or whatever. That's not what abortion is. It's a step further. So that's a dumb sort of way they put it, but a lot of people say that. So they believe that our bodily autonomy, we should be able to deny people the resources, and I think that should include the extension of what it produces, which are our labor, which eventually gets income. But they believe that the government should be able to confiscate income, especially if you make more of it than everybody else. If you make more, it doesn't matter if you worked harder, doesn't matter if you have been putting in more time. If you have more, you need to give up more, because that's the way their world works. And you need to care for everyone, and it needs to be redistributed. They don't care about your bodily autonomy. Then they don't care about the bodily autonomy of men who have to pay child support for like 18, 24 years, taking up to what, 30, 40, 50% of their income for the child. Now, I believe in all that stuff, but I just don't believe that we as a society really value bodily autonomy. How many people are out there advocating that we end the draft? I know we haven't had one in a while, but historically we have one. When a man turns 18, they have to go sign up to potentially die for their country. I like, pregnancy is no picnic, but it's 9 months. Your body, you may have like permanent stuff done, but people have babies all the time. people talk up like it's so scary to have a baby. Like, it's always sad when when a woman passes away in child labor, but we have like 3 million births a year in the country, and it's like less than 800 women who will die during childbirth, or not even just childbirth. I think it could just be like be afterwards, and it might even include like domestic violence, but I'm not 100% sure what that number is. Sometimes it's included, sometimes it's not. So if you want, I can understand being concerned about it, especially like if you're older, if you're heftier like I am. There's reason to be concerned, but it's not like a super rational fear. Depending on like whatever your, health is and your ages and etc. But you're talking about like an 18-year-old or something like I'm risking my life. Like, mate, not likely. Not likely. Oh boy, let's get back on it.
And these so-called leaders, so-called, claim that, well, we just think that this is a decision that should be made by the folks in the states. People in the states can vote on this, right? But at this moment, many of those same so-called leaders are the same ones who are passing laws to restrict the ability of people to vote.
Yeah, so that's a lie. That's a lie. So an example that they think is like restricting people to vote is like, hey, we don't think you should bring food like X amount close to the polling location. Or hey, we don't think we should have this many drop boxes. Or if you're going to drop off a ballot, you really need to do it yourself, or you need to have like someone who is like a spouse or something drop it off. Like you shouldn't be able to call like a random Democrat operative to just pick up a bunch of ballots and just drop them off somewhere. Like those are the sorts of things that they're saying and making harder to vote, like proof who you are with like ID. Those are the sort of things that they is making it harder to vote. Now, I guess technically, I guess you can say that, but but if I owned an ice cream truck and I parked it like 10 feet from your house, and I decided to move it like 15 feet instead, you could make the claim that I'm making it harder for you to have access to ice cream too. That doesn't mean it's like a dire like situation where you need to I don't know, cancel the all-star games and stuff like that. It's just really dishonest. But Kamala Harris, that's her thing. Dishonesty is her thing. She's like my least favorite out of all the Democrats. Like their whole entire slate. She's my least favorite person. The right to life and abortion, all that stuff going to the state level, yes, it did not belong on a federal level. Like that, the Supreme Court should not have ruled Roe v. Wade. It was a bad ruling. Most people who are honest acknowledge that. They're just mad that it's gone because it was their security blanket, and they don't want to have to argue their position state to state to state to state. Now there are states where it's already outlawed. There's states that are readily, easily going to pass those bills. In my state, Michigan, it's actually illegal in my state, and it's being like challenged in court. The governor's trying to like use her governor powers to go straight to our Supreme Court in Michigan, which is leaning left right now, to claim that our Constitution in Michigan has a right to abortion. It doesn't. That's already been settled also like in court before, like circuit court in like 1992, I think it was. So she's being really dishonest, but she's going to do what she's going to do. Because they're so desperate to protect, not even women, I would say, but just really the institution of abortion. Like Elizabeth Warren being upset about pregnancy crisis centers. That's not because you care about women. That's because you care about abortion. And Kamala Harris is someone who wants to protect the institution of abortion literally protected the institution of abortion, like in her state when Planned Parenthood was getting busted for selling baby body parts. They went after the person who exposed it rather than Planned Parenthood. It's a racket. It's a huge industry, and it is a racket. And a lot of these people get money from organizations like Planned Parenthood, so they can go ahead and run for office, and they make sure that Planned Parenthood and these places can get money funneled in. And it's beyond that. Pharmaceutical companies, governments pay for like fetal remains for experiments. They donate stuff to universities so they can have experiments and use the stem cells. It's a huge industry, and some people would reason and say that that is ultimately for a moral good. I think that's really dangerous, but okay, that's where we are. But the states voting on it, yes, the states can vote on it. Unfortunately, right now, and it's like basically how slavery was a state issue. I think that the unborn should have equal protection under the law, and it should be outlawed everywhere. And I have no qualms with saying my end game is the abolishment of abortion. I saw a really good video that someone said that you should use the word abolishment because you can't end something really like with like slavery. Some I guess technically we don't have it in the same kind of vein as we did, but you have like sex trafficking and all kind of other stuff to degrees, so you can't ever really get rid of it. And then it still goes on in other places in the world. We just don't talk about it. But with abortion, there's going to be people who always do it, find a way, find some kind of doctor who's willing to do a back alley abortion, which is still in a clinic, but just like they had to go through the back alley. That's where that term comes from. Not like you taking a hanger to yourself, actually in an alley. If you didn't know that, but I think it should be abolished, and I do think it should be illegal because they are alive, they are human beings, and they deserve the right to life. And it's really that simple. It's really, really, really that simple. So, I don't know. I wish I could debate Kamala Harris and these people with their really, really dumb arguments. I find that most of the time you can ask people, like they'll talk about Bali autonomy, all this other kind of stuff, and you're like, where'd the baby come from? And people play games with you a lot of times. They don't want to answer. It's kind of like Matt Walsh asking people, what is a woman? Like, I feel like that's like the pro-life thing. Like, how did the baby get there? Because when you say my body, my choice, you have to acknowledge that there were some choices made that resulted in the baby. It's not like people don't know how they get there. And I'll just say this to close out. I don't want to, I got a little bit more to talk to about the Biden stuff today. There's a lot of conversations going on about protecting abortion and a woman's access to abortion, but there's not really a lot of conversations about how do we prevent women from feeling like they need this procedure and really getting to the root of women, the reasons why they have abortions, and trying to squash them. Now, someone might look at the data and say, hey, X amount of women are actually having abortions because of financial reasons. And they'll say, well, that's why we need the government to pay for childcare and healthcare and make them have employers give mandatory like leave for mothers and fathers and so on. I don't think I think people are willing to be charitable in a lot of situations. I don't believe in government getting involved with a lot of this stuff. I do believe in like social safety nets, don't get me wrong, but think about the power they abused with COVID. I don't think they deserve any more, especially since they're with the power of their dollars. That's how it's decided a lot of the time how they can discriminate against you. Like in the case of like, so the OSHA mandates got struck down, but for like in cases of nurses and other stuff, they're like, well, these hospitals get federal funds so that yeah, they can say whether or not you have to inject yourself if you want to be employed there. And people were really trying hard not to give out religious exemptions. FYI, you might have had one. You might have the DOJ thought people had legit reasons, but people did not want to give them out. Especially like in Canada and stuff. There's people I knew that they were just like, we're not doing exceptions because doctors are so heavily pressured. So I don't think the government deserves more with that. But prior to that woman getting pregnant. So that would be really the way that you could stop women from needing to feel like they need abortion, is to just have them be more careful, have them be more responsible with not even just how they sleep with people, but sleeping with people at all, who they decide to sleep with. And like people are like birth control fails, all this stuff. There's guys, I know there's women out here who are just letting dudes go in them with nothing. I know it. Actually, like STDs and stuff, they're on the rise. I don't understand it. There was like a big TikTok kerfuffle like a couple months ago. Modern Warrior and like Chelsea Hart, they're big TikTokers. But this guy who's basically got famous, he's a Native American. He hates white people. His videos start hate colonizer, and he's like feminist, all this other blah blah blah. Chelsea Hart, she's a leftist. She mocks other white people. She flew out to him. They've been communicating, in long story short, she was unprotected. Made a big thing like I would have never. She got mad at him because he was sleeping with other girls, other women from TikTok too. He's allegedly married too. This is a big mess. But these girls didn't even fly themselves. He didn't even fly them out. They flew themselves out, sleeping with this dude, unprotected. And it was just so wild to me. And she was like, I would have never opened my body up to you and did this unprotected if I had known that you weren't going to be just for me. And she would show her text messages. I'm like, baby girl, it didn't sound like from the evidence, it didn't sound like he was like gonna be just pro you. I don't understand it, but there are women out there, so don't play games with me. There's a lot of women who just aren't being smart with how they're sleeping around with folks. I mean, I'm gonna be upfront. Like I think most, if you're not married, you should really practice abstinence. That's my thing. People cringe like I throw a bucket of water and you melt like the Wicked Witch. 86% of abortions are from unmarried women, so you can choose to not take my very good advice, but you can at least make smart decisions about who you entangle with and how you entangle with them. It will solve a lot of problems, especially when you know you have other goals in mind with school, with work, your career, etc. If you really feel like a baby would just derail you so much, you need to be really careful about how that baby comes to be. And people say we need more sex education. Majority of people who have abortions are like age 20 to 40. I think like that's 80% of abortions. These people know how babies are made. But it would be pointless to have all this sex education and say that's the answer when people are saying consent to sex isn't consent to pregnancy. These people are purposely removing accountability from their actions. I understand you have sex and you don't mean for the baby to happen, but it's nature, it's biology, like evolutionary standard. That's like what the sex is for. So you're like resentful of nature. I understand, but it is what it is. It is what it is. But removing that sort of mental accountability makes it more palatable to have the abortion. So we're not going in a good direction to end this stuff other than people banning it, which does also help get rid of the numbers, obviously. And there's data for that as well. But if we want to really help society not be in the situation, we need to really have conversations, tough conversations about prevention and responsibility. So I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that. Last thing I want to talk about is just Joe Biden. There is a Quinnipiac poll that came out, and Hispanics are, he's at 19% approval rating. That's wild. That is wild. Absolutely wild to me. And I know it's probably disappointing for a lot of Democrats. I saw people sharing it kind of panicked, like, what is happening with Hispanics? Inflation is freaking everybody out. Inflation is freaking everybody out, especially if you're like coming from places where inflation was high and was hard to get food and all this other kind of like people don't want that repeated, and people feel Joe Biden can blame it on a lot of other things for a long time if he wants to. But I think people instinctively know. I remember just or like, I remember what it was like just a few years ago. And I didn't like the guy in office, but I had money in my pocket. It went further. um and things are pretty roaring. And now I can't find food that I want in the grocery store. Like a lot of things are out and etc. Things are scarce and things are high. And it doesn't seem like that's going to change. Now, gas prices are going down right now a bit, but Biden is deciding to take, or there's talk of him taking exact executive action with climate and abortion. Now, I don't know what all he's going to do with declaring some kind of emergency with abortion and directing funds and whatnot. He can be easily challenged in the courts if he pushes too far. But as far as what he thinks he's able to do, federal dollars are not supposed to go directly toward certain things because of the Hyde Amendment. So unless they really plan to appeal that, I don't know legally where they plan to go. And as long as I don't know how fast things will make their way up through the courts, but it will take some challenges. Now, I don't think he minds being sued, to be honest, because he'll say, "I tried. Look at that, I tried." But these conservatives in the court, this tyrannical court, with these justices picked by this president, the former president, he won't like say his name, who didn't even win by the popular vote. They don't represent the popular will of Americans. That's how they put it. The Supreme Court is supposed to be independent, and the Senate, who confirms all these folks, they're they represent the states, not the population, so it doesn't matter. But I guess they don't care about civics and all that stuff. He'll just blame it on them. And he'll say, I tried. At least he'll say that to his radical base. Everyone else will be like, I know people are very passionate about this whole baby killing thing, but gas is high and food is high and I don't like it. Like that's where people's minds are. And I talk very passionately about this issue, and people who are pro-choice tech talk very passionately about that issue. But the main problem, like for both sides of that, has been like apathy. People not caring enough to see that your way. And I think the more people decide to care, and then if they're intrigued and they look at the data and they look at embryology and they look at the science, and I think they're kind of come my way and not so much their way. The majority of Americans are not for like super extreme measures. Like the left is pushing like abortion up to 9 months. They're trying not to say that, but they're like when they're asked, they're like, "We'll just trust the woman." Okay, so you believe 9 months? Okay, like 10% of Americans, which is like extraordinarily high still to me, and egregious. That's where they at. They agree with that. The plurality of Americans believe the abortion should just be available, like life of the mother, rape and incest, and then the rest of like everybody else is like not past 15 weeks. Now, if you include the 15 weeks plus I think it's 37 don't believe that abortion should be available except for those exceptions. And then I think it was maybe 23% believe that abortion should not be legal or permitted past 15 weeks. So you're already at a majority of Americans who truthfully don't want Roe v. Wade to be a thing, because Roe v. Wade would have prevented the Dobbs things like the Dobbs case for protecting life at past 15 weeks. And then the numbers are cut with like 12 weeks and then like 6 weeks. But most people don't believe in the 9 month stuff. That's really, really extreme. But that's where Biden is. That's where Whitmer is. That's where Haley Stevens is. That's where Beto O'Rourke is. That's where Stacey Abrams, I don't know if I said her yet. That's where they are. Hillary Clinton. She kind of made them more fashionable in 2016. It definitely is probably the reason why she's not president right now. So that's what they're going to lean into, and that's just really not going to do it. Especially, we talked about this yesterday and the day before. David French wrote a piece about the God gap, and one reason why the Democrats are losing some of their super diverse base that they wanted, and it's like quickly becoming the party of the upper white elite class, while the Republican Party is growing and becoming more diverse, is because of the certain values that people have that are you know, uh, what word I'm looking for? I guess you could say confirmed within their religion, and bleeds out into their cultures and their morals and so on. And leftists, they're like, oh, religion, etc. Like David French talked about how he went to college and people just like had such visceral rage and disgust toward the idea of like religious people and that certain stuff that they believe. But which is, and it still amazes me that so much of the black vote like is like dedicated to Democrats, because those people like, oh, that you're like, oh, it's so gross that they have all these beliefs. You're talking about black people, like largely, largely. But Hispanics are very religious, so they're going to continue, and they don't. One of the reasons, and I did a video, if you have not seen this, about why I believe that black voters vote Democrat. But one of the reasons is that black people feel that their blackness is part of their identity more than any other race. And Democrats, they do a pretty good job at tying them together as if it means the same thing. So if you're not a Democrat and you're black, well, Joe Biden feels comfortable saying you ain't black, for example. Like that's been a thing for a long time. You're an Uncle Tom, you're a coon, etc. Like that's your race traitor. That is like the militant sort of thinking. It's been going on for a long time. So they marry that blackness to the association of being a Democrat, even though originally everyone was Republican. The black people were Republican, but that's what they've done. There's other reasons, but that's a video I have on my YouTube channel and my Facebook page. You guys can go find that. It's about an hour long, I think. It's got some good information in there. Hispanics were like the next on the group, but not as high as like the black people. So them trying to appeal to them by Joe Biden calling them like breakfast tacos or comparing them to breakfast tacos and pushing the Latinx thing that no one like in the real world refers to them as, or trying to really make it think like those things aren't relating to them, especially when they're like, what's this thing about drag queens in every school I hear? That kind of, it's not jiving. It's not jiving. So Biden's going to continue having a problem, especially if he can't do something with the economy. And he's about to make things worse if he does any more executive action with regards to climate change, and starts to decide to still restrict these oil companies for the sake of an emergency on climate. That's just going to de-incentivize them for like long-term investments. It's going to mess up with our future supply, and it's going to just make gas prices go up. But what do they care? You have people like Pete Buttigieg like, I can't believe so many people are resistant to getting electric cars. And then Massey like clowned him. He's like, are you aware how more expensive it would be for people's electric bills if they had to charge a car? Like way more expensive than your air conditioning. That's like, your air conditioning is like your biggest bill on average for like your home. So are they not thinking things through? And if you live in an apartment or something, you probably don't realize like how big electricity bills can get for people living in homes. If families, especially families with multiple cars, like had to trade them in so they could all like charge their cars. That's a pretty big bill. It's a pretty big bill. These people are just really, really, really detached from reality. And I, d- I know it's not like all these people lived in DC their whole lives. They're senators, they're Congress people. They grew up in different towns and it blue some of them in blue collar areas where they, and families. How is it possible to be so detached? Maybe that's just the monster of I don't know, particular colleges they went to, or just being in DC too long, or just talking to their bubbles, but it's so bizarre. It's so bizarre. Biden could get his poll numbers up if he wanted to focus on fixing the problems, but he doesn't. He's frustrated when people critique him. He'll push back, and he just leans into wanting to appease to his base rather than just trying to be a real president. He's been fighting so long for this job, and he just utterly sucks at it. Utterly sucks. But it's funny to watch his poll numbers fall the way that they are. Um, but at the same time, you don't even if I don't like him, it's not a good thing that the country's not doing well. Nobody wants that. When people would like rag on Bush back in the day and just like have a visceral hate, which by the way, my dad would like go to barber shops to argue with people about politics prior to the days of being able to do like Facebook and Twitter and all that kind of stuff. So he was like a OG real one, I guess. But people would rag on Bush and he'd be why do people like want him to fail to the regard to such a extreme degree? He's like, it's like we're all riding on a bus and he's driving the bus. Like, you don't want it to go off of a cliff. So it's sad though that I'm glad that people are rejecting these ideologies, and a lot of them have very dangerous ideologies. And I want people to be aware, and I do want there to be like a swing back to reality, you know? And people will snap back and say, okay, we tried these freaks and it didn't work out, so we can fix things. And we can fix things. But it is sad that the poll numbers reflect a reality in the country. With Trump, there was like things were good, but people hated him because of his different quirks, of his attitudes, because things he said, because of how the press portrayed him. Like he gave that really good speech at Mount Rushmore, and they're like, "Oh, it's evil, it was racist, it's terrible." I was at the inauguration, heard his speech. It was a good speech. It was a positive speech. Go if you don't believe me, just go read it. Go read the transcript. Don't listen to Trump say it, just read the words. You would see that it's more positive than CNN, who was like, it was so dark and divisive. So people had a perception of how the world was, and that reflected in Trump's poll numbers. But they were still better than Biden's. Biden's numbers reflect his score of being the president, and it's low. And I don't think he has a bottom. I don't think he has a bottom. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Please go to blacktnews.com. Check out different articles that I have on the website. Check out different videos we have on the website. Please go check out that video of why Black people vote Democrat, because I think it is very informative. People do ask me all the time, so I put together a video together. Um, so there's three different main reasons. I talked about one a little bit, and you can go ahead and check out. I think one is perceived identity. I think another one's like perceived heritage and maybe perceived policies. Is perceived because everything in reality is actually a lie. So we can go ahead and check out that article, that video. You guys can check out different merchandise that I have on the website as well. I do write books, as I said earlier. I will be at Frankenmuth this weekend. That's in Michigan. If you're from Michigan, there's an authors event called Once Upon a Book. So I will bring my books there. We'll be signing them, and so it should be a lot of fun. So I have that event, and I also have I'll be at Motor City Comic Con in October. So I'll have a booth there. I'll be hopefully right next to my sister again, and she'll be selling some art, and I'll be, signing some books. So come out there. If you like what I do here, blacktnews.com, go to blacktnews.com/donate. If you would like to support, any little bit really helps, and I really appreciate it. Make sure that you guys are liking, that you're subscribing, that you're sharing, and all that stuff. Someone did ask me if I'm on Spotify. Not Black Tea News. I do have a religious podcast that's available called Project 31 that is on Spotify. Should get on Spotify, and Spotify, Apple, all that stuff. So I will look into that and have that soon, because I know people are asking and like to just are necessarily, I guess, doing everything and can't visually watch everything, but sometimes just want to hear it in the radio, etc. So it's in the works, I guess I'll say. Thank you guys for caring and asking. Thank you guys for the comments. Again, my Wi-Fi was super weird today. I all my sort of visuals I can't really see them to even pull them up. So that's why I'm not showing, show this shirt, show this thing. Don't know what quite is wrong, but I'm glad that we got through it. The internet can't be I don't know why everything's kind of not loading, because obviously you guys can see me and it's streamed fine. I'm just quickly going through the comments really quick. See if there's any questions I can answer. No. Anyway, thank you guys, and I will see you tomorrow.